I learned that the best way to have a baby is at home. I was comfortable. I was surrounded by people who cared about me. I didn't feel the need to have someone tell me what to do with my body. There was no need for anyone to tell me when to push. There was no need for anyone to tell me to lay down. I was in whatever position was comfortable for me. With my second child, he was born right onto our bed after a few pushes, very smooth, very tranquil. And my third baby was born standing up. I was leaning over his crib, and I had been in labor maybe for 3 hours, and it was just very calm and peaceful. We had rainforest music playing. The children were in the kitchen with their grandmother and my brother, and it was just an extreme out-of-body experience, you know, very surreal. You know, it was like every other day. You know, it was a special, amazing day, but it was just like every other day, you know. This day, I was going to have a baby. And I think it's important that the father and the children are able to experience it this way, because they're able to actually be participants. They're able to actually have a role. Whereas in the hospital, children aren't permitted in delivery, and oftentimes the fathers are secondary. They're not participants, you know, and this is their child. Two people come together to create a baby. Why aren't both those people as interactive with the birthing process? And that's all.
Okay.
I learned before I went into labor with my last baby is about limbic imprinting. It's something that I really didn't have much knowledge of before. And when we say limbic, we're referring to a part of the brain. And it's the part of our brain that holds onto emotions, to memories, to feelings, to experiences. And when we say imprinting, we're normally talking about the early stages of these emotions and experiences. Like what our parents were feeling when we were conceived, like what our mothers were feeling when they carried us in their womb. Were they happy? Were they sad? Were they hurting? Were they abused? What their every thought was, with their every emotion, this was transmitted to us while in uterus. And then during our birthing process, how were our mothers made to feel? Were they made to feel cared for? Were they made to feel loved? Or were they made to feel like patients that had a medical sickness that needed to be cared for? You know, all of these things were transmitted to us during birth and affect our birthing process. So a cycle begins, because at one time, everybody was born at home. My father-in-law was born in a cornfield, and he's okay. He's with us today, and at some point in our evolution, we begin to believe that we could not have babies naturally. So this was something that was imprinted on us through our mothers, through their mothers, and through their mothers. And we begin to believe that we could not have our babies at home, that we could not have our babies amongst midwives, that we needed assistance. And this is definitely not the case. You know, it's a very peaceful thing to have a baby. It's a very extraordinary experience, you know. Babies are born throughout the world every day, and they're fine, and they're healthy, and they're strong. And it's because they have a warm setting to be born in. When we can begin to heal our limbic imprinting, when we can begin to heal our birth trauma, the things that happened to us during our birth, then we can begin to have births that are healthier, that are safer, and that are closer to home, if not at home. You know, we have many options to have birth at home. You can have an unassisted birth. You can have a birth with a midwife. You can have a birth with a doula who's a labor coach. You can have a birth with your friends and your family, with your children present or not present. You have choices, and that is one of the reasons why we're doing this documentary, to let you know that you do have choices. Because now what's being presented to us is the only safe way to have a baby is in a hospital, and it's simply not true. Many studies have been done that show that it's actually safer to have a baby at home, that the outcomes are better to have a baby at home. And these are things that will change as we change our thoughts and our limbic imprinting. As we begin to heal, we will see that, it's a very easy, smooth, transforming, empowering experience.
Go.
Okay, Ohm was born at home. We were living in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey at the time. And we had just came back from Ethiopia, which is where he was actually conceived. He came back in my belly. And we were seeking a midwife at the time, but we didn't have many funds when we came back, and the funds that we had, we knew we needed to live. So we couldn't afford a midwife at the time. And we decided that we were going to have this baby ourselves, just the two of us, that we were going to make this happen. And we did a lot of research, and we did a lot of studying, we did a lot of talking to people via the internet who had births at home. And, there was no option. This was the only way for us. So we knew that we had to make it happen. And the pregnancy was challenging because we were getting settled. It was like we came back from Ethiopia as immigrants. We had 5 bags to our name, and that was it. And we had to start from scratch. So the birthing process for Ohm was similar. We had never had this experience. We were starting from scratch. We were learning ourselves. We were learning about each other. We were learning about how our bodies work. We were learning about how nature works, how nature will take its course whether you intervene or not, and when you don't intervene, it's a much smoother, much more surreal experience. And Ohm, I went into labor in the evening. It was late in the evening. I remember I was sleeping next to Noah that night, and I felt my water break. And I went into the room. I woke up Isatua, and I said, it's time. He was like, what? It's time. And I was like, yeah, it's time. And I was in my bedroom most of the time, and I slowly felt my body going through the changes. I slowly felt my body opening up, and I just released my ego and released everything that I had been taught about birth to that experience, and I just let it unfold. And it did. And he was born right on our bed. Isatua cut the cord. He delivered the placenta. We bagged it and put it in our freezer. And that was it. A few hours later, I got up and I took a shower, and Ohm was never separated from us. In a hospital, a baby right after it's born is taken from the mother. The mother's not allowed to bond. The mother's not allowed to nurse. The mother's not allowed to have the skin-to-skin contact. That's so important right after birth. That's how a baby knows that it's loved. That's how a baby knows that it's cared for. That's how a baby bonds. And the more peaceful that transition can happen from birth canal to being on planet Earth, physically out on planet Earth, the more smoother that is, the more smoother their life will be. Because how we are born is so important. It's so influential in every part of our existence. If we are born into loving arms rather than into the arms of someone who is just meeting us for the first time, like a nurse or, an obstetrician. If we are born into those loving arms, then we learn to trust early. We learn to know that our needs will be taken care of early. We learn to know that our mother will comfort us, that she will provide us with our basic necessities and love. You don't learn that from being born into the hands of a foreign person, A hospital is a very sterile place. It's a place that's meant for sickness. And pregnancy and labor and birthing, they're not sicknesses. They're normal parts of everyday life. People are born every day, all day. And it's just a part of life. It's not something that has to be managed. It doesn't have to be taken over by anybody. It doesn't have to be studied. It just has to be. You know, if we allow ourselves to just give in to the feelings, to the emotions, to the intensity of birth, we can actually even have birth without pain. Birth that doesn't have to be medicated. You know, a lot of times in the hospitals, women aren't even allowed to feel what it is that their body is doing when it's birthing. You know, they're completely detached from the birth. I remember speaking to my grandmother about her birth, and she was actually put to sleep under general anesthesia. So she has no recollection of her birthing process. And when her babies were born, they were put right into the nursery. She didn't have them right after birth. So there was no contact. This child is born out of this woman and has no clue who this woman is until the nurse decides it's time for her to bond. And oftentimes it's too late. You know, it takes longer for the baby to get comfortable. The baby cries more often. The baby trusts less that its basic needs are going to be taken care of. My mother, when she had myself and my brothers, she was in a hospital, and it was the same for her. Her births were very medicated, and the ones that weren't medicated, because she did have a C-section, the ones that weren't were still managed, where she wasn't allowed or permitted to be empowered through that experience. When you have a natural birth, you know you can do anything, you know? Like, you can go out and conquer the world because you know that you were able to bring this life through you. When a woman doesn't have that experience, when a father is not allowed to participate in a natural birth experience, that form of empowerment is non-existent. You know, they have no clue of what energy they can generate on their own. You know, they have no clue of their own inner wisdom, of their own innate abilities to bring life into the world. They think that it has to be medicated, that a woman can only have a birth in pain, that a woman can only have a birth in stirrups on her back, and this is just, it's not the case, you know. You know, we're doing this project because we want to share with you our experiences, and we want to learn about yours. You know, if you have had a home birth and you want to share the experience, please let us know. If you've had a hospital birth, we want to hear what your experience was like there. We want to know whether it was positive to you, whether it was something you felt could have been done different, if there was another thought that you had on something that you wanted or someone that you wanted at your birth. We want to hear all of your stories, all of your experiences. And you can go to our website,